There's nothing like a few water crossings during a fuel range test. All that slippery. Welcome everybody back to the channel. Very exciting stuff. In today's video, I'm going to be testing out the full fuel range of my mighty Suzuki DRZ400E with a big bore kit and 17 litre safari tank fitted. Now I get asked all the time, what is the fuel range of such a setup, Lance? So I thought, why not make a purpose-built video about such a thing? But more importantly, for my own sort of knowledge, I've got a very big outback trip coming up, which I'm keeping under wraps for now. But my big bore kit's around 7,000 kilometers old, but I need to know exactly what I'm working with because where I'm going, there's not too many fuel stops to be had. For this test to have some sort of accuracy, I have set a few parameters in place to try to replicate those long distance, 100-kilometer-hour type rides. Number one, tire pressures. Front and back, I'm running 18 PSI because where I'm going, there's a lot of sandy, corrugated, high-speed tracks, so 18 PSI has been set. Number two, the gearing. I'm running a 1544 sprocket setup. In my opinion, especially on a stock engine, 1544 is the go-to gearing for those 100-kilometer all-day type rides, and it still allows you to tackle some of the harder terrain if that presents itself. And number three is, if anyone's doing a week-long trip, I feel like you'd be similar to myself. I carry around that 20 kilo to 22 kilo mark. So I've used my day setup, but I've added some emergency fuel to add up 4 kilos of weight. And I've put some weight plates in so I can also do some arm curls as I'm riding to get my setup to 20 kilos to try to replicate what I'll be carrying out there on this outback trip. But before we take off, it is important to note I have filled up to the brim earlier this morning. I have set my odometer to 0, but I'm about 50 kilometers into my trip right now. But I need to clear up about the 17 litre safari tank. It is advertised as 17 litres because as you're riding, you can use 17 litres or close to without having to get off your bike and lay it down to then get the last 3 litres or so from this side onto the other side. But in actual fact, the tank holds around 20.5 litres. And for this test, we're going to base that off 20 litres because as you do lay the bike down beyond that 17 litre mark and get the right side to the left side, you always get a little bit stuck here, which is really hard to get into here and use it. So I pretty much just count that as about 500 mil. And we can use 20 litres in this tank or very close to it. So all I need to do now is hop on this bike and knock over the kilometres and let's get going. Whilst I'm riding along and trying to keep in line of my intro of relevance to a long distance outback trip, today's ride will be around 2/3 on the tar because I'm trying to maintain that sort of average speed of 100 kilometers per hour. And unfortunately, in and around the area that I live, I don't have any dirt roads that go for hundreds of kilometers where I can maintain high speeds. Thus, I am on the bitumen. And then 1/3 of my trip, I will pick some fire trails where I do that 60 to 80 kilometer mark, just trying to really replicate those long distance trips to get an accurate fuel range. And more importantly, I won't be revving the gears, I'm not snapping the throttle, I'm just riding in a normal fashion, being safe and trying to maximize fuel range. There's nothing like a few water crossings during a fuel range test. Oh, that's slippery. Oh, slippery. Don't fall off, don't fall off. Ooh. Bit of that green algae along the base of that. This has got absolutely nothing to do with the fuel range test, but I've got to acknowledge what a splendid, fantastic days of riding I am having, hanging out with all these farm animals. Don't run in front of me though, and just really enjoying an easy ride. I'm just about to click over to 200 kilometers, and how convenient is this? It's gonna happen right by this little river here. We should be able to stop right here and just have a look where the tank is at, but 200 kilometers on the dot. So let's have a look. So here we are. Hopefully the GoPro shows that, but I feel that we're above halfway still, which is pretty good considering so far I've pretty much done 100 kilometers an hour the whole way, other than maybe 20 or 30 k. So we're on track for over 400 kilometers, which is very, very good for me. And we'll just continue on and see what we end up with. Not bad scenery at all. I love coming through this section. I'm just about to finish up on the last dirt tracks for the trip, and the rest of this will be tar until I run out of fuel. But I'll just quickly stop. I'm at 365 kilometers, and I'm doing better than I thought, because for where I'm at, I mean, I've still got a fair bit of fuel left. On both sides it's the same, and I'm at 360 kilometers, or 365 should I say. So far that is epic. I'm definitely going to be getting over 400k. Very keen to see how far over, but soon enough I'll be doing 100k an hour again, and well, we'll just keep going till we run out, like I said. Let's see. So I've just stopped, and very coincidentally right near a petrol station over there, but I don't need that yet, but good to know it's nearby. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm at 416 kilometers so far, and I've still got fuel. I've still got fuel. Unbelievable. But I've got well, really plenty of fuel. The way I'm going to shape up to 450 kilometers, but I now need to get this side over to here, and the best way to do that is either be on a hill and or on ground, but is lower than when you're going to tip your bike, because otherwise what I find is your handlebars will hit the ground. You won't get all the fuel over. But let's give this a crack. Get all my fuel over. There we go. Lift that back up. And I've brought the fuel over. Next to nothing over there. And I'm just going to keep riding. Probably cut laps to be safe near this petrol station. And let's just see exactly where we get to. Well, I'm still riding, cutting some laps on some residential streets. I'm at 440 kilometers. Next to no fuel left, but desperate times call for desperate measures sometimes. And if you had to push on and go a bit slower to save fuel, you could still be going. Unbelievable. Alright guys, I'm gonna have to call it quits. I have finally hit my reserve, and in my opinion, once you hit reserve, you're pretty much out of fuel. There's not much more to be had after that point. I'll just pull up here. Let me just shut this bike off, get the phone out of the way because you can't see. But there we go, 450 kilometers and 700 meters. And that has how much fuel? And I have this much fuel left. So what was happening is I was bouncing around and it conked out on me because I was starting to get areas where there wasn't enough fuel. So hit the reserve. Look, the reality is, guys, I'm so impressed. If I was in this particular situation, you're up shit creek unless you're right next to a petrol station. But you could probably get, you know, the reality is about 10 more kilometers out of that if you needed to. But I'm going to officially say that I'm safe for 400 kilometers no matter what. I mean, it's a really bad day if I've burnt through 50 kilometers worth of fuel. Must be a pretty big headwind. But with backtracking and whatnot, you always want to make sure you've got enough fuel in terms of reserves. So anything over 400 kilometers, I'd probably carry fuel for just in case you had to do some backtracking. But I tell you what, pretty happy to be able to get 450 kilometers out of 20 liters of fuel with a little bit left. What more can you ask for? And that was me doing a lot of 100-kilometer-an-hour sort of stuff. So if you were doing 80, maybe 60 kilometers and you had to baby it, you'd get a whole lot more range out of that tank. But there you go, everybody. There is the fuel range test. Big bore kit, 17 liters Safari tank, although it holds 20 liters. 450 kilometers of predominantly 100-kilometer-hour type riding. So if you wanted to know that sort of stuff, I've just proven it right there. So thanks for watching, guys. A bit of fun for me today, and I'll catch us all on the next ride.